just out last night. Look at this announcement here by the Canadian government. Statement on behalf of Canada, chair of the Freedom Online Coalition, a call to action on state-sponsored disinformation in Ukraine. And you can see this is from Global Affairs Canada. That's the foreign ministry. Freedom Online Coalition. That's what they're called. That sounds pretty great, doesn't it? I mean, can I join? I believe in online freedom. The obvious and most important freedoms of which would be, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of expression, freedom of thought and belief. Those are all found in our Canadian Charter of Rights in Section 2, by the way. It's called Fundamental Freedoms. In the U.S., they're covered by what they call the First Amendment. So I'm pretty pumped up about Freedom Online Coalition. But let me quote from Orwell's 1984. This is from the book. The Ministry of Peace concerns itself with war. The Ministry of Truth with lies. The Ministry of Love with torture. And the Ministry of Plenty with starvation. These contradictions are not accidental, nor do they result from ordinary hypocrisy. They are deliberate exercises in doublethink. Doublethink. That's an important psychological term that Orwell invented to hold two mutually irreconcilable ideas at the same time. So Trudeau is in blackface, but he calls you racist. That's doublethink. Trudeau sexually assaulted Rose Knight in Creston, BC, but he calls you a misogynist. That's doublethink. Chrystia Freeland's own grandfather was a Nazi propagandist, and she helped cover that up for him, but she'll call truckers Nazis. That's doublethink. Do you get it? And so it is with the Freedom Online Coalition. That's what they have called their censorship committee. So let me read a bit from their announcement. As 2022 chair of the Freedom Online Coalition, Canada leads a coalition of 34 governments united by our belief that the same human rights people enjoy offline must be protected online. All right, well, that sounds pretty good so far. That's all those freedoms I mentioned a moment ago, right? But that only lasts for one sentence. Here's the second sentence. The unprovoked and unjustifiable attack by the Russian Federation against the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence of the democratic state of Ukraine was preceded by a steady outpouring of fabricated claims and unfounded allegations online by the Russian Federation. We have since witnessed a continued onslaught of disinformation orchestrated by the Russian Federation. Okay, it's war. Both sides engage in propaganda. I don't know if you heard about the story of Snake Island, where a brave group of Ukrainian soldiers held out against all odds against a Russian military ship, and they died, their last words being F you. Did you see that story of heroism? Or maybe you saw this. Here's a tweet from a U.S. congressman about the ghost of Kiev, the Ukrainian fighter pilot who was shooting down so many Russian planes. They have a picture of him. Samuel is his name. Or maybe you heard that the Russians actually had the temerity to attack a Holocaust memorial at Babi Yar in Ukraine. Did you hear about that? All of those were fake stories. Did you know that? That Snake Island story, it happened except for the soldiers actually surrendered, so they're alive. They're not dead. That ghost of Ukraine, Samuel, that's a comedian from Rhode Island named Samuel Hyde. It's not real. And here's an Israeli reporter standing in front of the Holocaust Memorial at Babi Yar, which is obviously undamaged. Like I say, propaganda everywhere, and your job as a grown-up is to try to sort through it. I have not been convinced by the Russian propaganda that they're right. It has not made me support their war. The Ukrainian propaganda has actually made me more cautious about repeating what they say because I don't want to republish things that are revealed to be fakes. I don't want to talk about Snake Island if it turns out to be a fake story. I don't think either side's propaganda has changed my mind. It's only made me slower to jump to conclusions, which frankly is probably a good idea in this era of Twitter. I don't know if we have to immediately come to a conclusion about things. I think that if Canada were at war, a real war for our survival, I would permit myself to be more jingoistic. The last war Canada was involved with, I don't know if you remember this, under Stephen Harper actually, was toppling Libya's Muammar Gaddafi. And I'm not particularly proud of Canada for doing that. I think it was a disaster. I have no idea what our national interest supposedly was. We did also have a grand total of 6 CF-18 fighter jets in the war against ISIS terrorists, but Trudeau almost immediately called them home after becoming Prime Minister. Those aren't even really wars, though, are they? I don't know. I don't feel compelled by patriotism to support obvious PR projects like when Trudeau sent our troops to Mali. Can you find Mali, M-A-L-I? Can you find it on a map? Don't fib. I'll admit I cannot find Mali on a map. Why did we send troops there? Oh, probably because Trudeau's mother, Margaret Trudeau, went on a vacation there and really fell in love with the place. So why not use Canadian soldiers to make Trudeau's mom feel good? Yeah, no. I guess what I'm saying is I support our troops and I support peace. And I would support a patriotic war in our national interest, God forbid, if Canada were ever thrust into one. But that doesn't mean I clap along as our soldiers are used for virtue signaling or some pawns on a chessboard. Don't think for a second that every one of those military deployments that I've just listed hasn't been wrung out for propaganda purposes of Trudeau or Harper, if not by our government. Trudeau himself, that strange Mali decision, maybe it was for his mom. Which brings me back to propaganda and the announcement last night by Trudeau and his censorship squad. So they've got this Freedom Online coalition, and they're really mad at Vladimir Putin. Okay, got it. Me too. And then they say this, I quote, "State-sponsored disinformation campaigns undermine peace, prosperity, and individual freedoms, threatening to destabilize the fabric of our rules-based international system." Now, I'm not sure how propaganda undermines my freedom. Propaganda, it's ideas, good ideas or bad ideas, depending on whose side you're on. How does what Russia Today or the Ukrainian state broadcaster, which, by the way, is accredited at Canada's Parliament, how do they erode my freedom or my prosperity for that matter? And even the claim that they undermine peace, propaganda doesn't declare war. Propaganda doesn't blow up buildings. People do. Soldiers do. Russia has engaged in propaganda for years. I don't think it's a coincidence that they only acted in the face of Joe Biden's weakness. Propaganda didn't do that. Putin looked at Biden, looked at the West, and made a decision. Propaganda is how he excuses the thing, but it's not the thing itself. The war is the thing itself. The army is the thing itself. Here's the very next line in this press release. "A strong democracy relies on access to diverse and reliable sources of news and information so that members of society can form opinions, hold governments and individuals to account, and participate in public debate." Well, hang on. I thought they just said that some divergent opinions were dangerous. Which is it? Is a diversity of opinion good or bad? Or just the ones that Trudeau says are reliable? What exactly does reliable mean? For example, is Trudeau reliable? No, I don't think so, but he thinks so. How about we each decide for ourselves? But look at this wording pretzel. This is from the announcement. "We stand with the people of Ukraine, reaffirming that they should be able to participate meaningfully in society online and offline, free from oppressive practices such as state-sponsored disinformation." Hang on. But being free from words you don't like, that's a counterfeit freedom. You're twisting the word freedom. You have no human right not to be offended. You have no right to have other points of view silenced. That's not a human right at all, actually. That's not a shield to protect you. That's a sword to silence your opponents. That's the power to censor. They have announced a new censorship plan, and they've called it freedom. They've simply come up with a trick to label anything they don't like as disinformation and call it oppressive. That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.